on Vaticano. As we approach the feast of St. Augustine, we explore the life and legacy of one of Christianity's greatest minds. From Pavia, where his relics are preserved, to Algeria, where he served as Bishop of Hippo. We also look at the Augustinian order and what it means to lead this spiritual family. And we explore the saint's letter recommended by the Pope as spiritual reading for the faithful. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. More than 16 centuries after his death, St. Augustine continues to call pilgrims to his tomb, even pontiffs. For Pope Leo XIV, visiting Pavia, St. Augustine's resting place in northern Italy, was more than a personal pilgrimage. It was a journey to the spiritual roots that have shaped his life and ministry as the first Augustinian pope, and to the wisdom the saint's life continues to offer the Church.
The figure
of St. Augustine shines with a precious light. His thought, the story of his conversion, and his spirituality remind us of the value and primacy of the interior life. Do not go outside yourself. Return within yourself. Truth dwells in the inner man.
La verità abita nell'uomo interiore.
The remains of St. Augustine have rested in Pavia since 723 AD, when they were transferred here at the behest of the Lombard king Liutprand. They're housed in the imposing and historic Basilica of San Pietro in Ciel d'Oro, the Basilica of St. Peter in the Golden Sky in English. Towering above the relics is the spectacular Ark of St. Augustine, a 14th century funerary monument carved from white Carrara marble and considered one of the finest masterpieces of Gothic sculpture. At the top, relief panels illustrate important moments from Augustine's life, including one of the most significant, his conversion.
In preda all'angoscia, aveva tutti I beni materiali.
Consumed by anguish, he had every material possession imaginable, yet he was not happy. God calls him through a very simple song, a child's little rhyme saying, Tolle legge, take and read, take and read. He had with him the book of the letters of St. Paul, and he interpreted that chant as a call from God addressed personally to him. He opened the book of St. Paul's letters at random, and the very verse that pierced his heart appeared before him. Not in lust, not in the pleasures of the flesh, will you find your happiness, but rather in putting on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Rivestirvi del Signore vostro Gesù Cristo.
Among the other panels are scenes of Augustine listening to the sermons of St. Ambrose in the Cathedral of Milan, unable to find any errors in his teaching, his eventual baptism by St. Ambrose, and the presentation of his rule to his followers.
Troviamo al centro, nel riquadro centrale,
in the center, in the central panel, we find Augustine presenting his rule of life, the rule of St. Augustine, to his monks, to us, to all of us, friars, monks, sisters, and lay people. He offers this rule of life so that we may live the gospel with unity of purpose, in a communion of mutual love for one another, and be able to share this inner richness with all those who await the gift and the light of truth.
Che aspettano il dono e la luce della verità.
Below these scenes, at the center of the monument, lies a marble statue of St. Augustine, supported by 6 deacons, a work realized according to the vision of the local prior at that time.
E sul basamento devono esserci.
It was to rest on a base featuring the 12 apostles, each holding a scroll bearing a portion of the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. The statues projecting from the base were meant to represent the virtues that St. Augustine embodied throughout his life: obedience, chastity, humility, justice, temperance, in short, all the virtues that Augustine lived out and exemplified.
Le virtù che in fondo Agostino ha vissuto.
Beyond the ark, artworks throughout the church, including mosaics in the floor, bring to life St. Augustine's ministry as Bishop of Hippo.
Questo è un pezzo del pavimento.
This mosaic is a section of the floor of the Basilica Pacis in Algeria, the basilica that was brought to life by the preaching and example of St. Augustine. It was his cathedral in Hippo, and this is a gift from the Algerians at the end of the 1800s, to remember his feat, his mission, the evangelization that Augustine carried out not only in his diocese, but throughout the entire world for the universal church.
Alla Chiesa universale.
St. Augustine's life and thought were marked by the search for truth and a deep desire for peace, themes that also stood out during Pope Leo's second apostolic trip to Africa, during which he made it a point of beginning his journey in Algeria, the land of St. Augustine.
E infatti sono molto contento.
I am very happy to visit again the land of St. Augustine, who also offers a very important bridge in interreligious dialogue. It is truly a blessing for me personally, but also, I believe, for the Church and for the world, because we must always seek bridges to build peace and reconciliation.
La pace e la riconciliazione.
Upon landing in Algeria, Pope Leo became the first pontiff ever to visit the country, to the great joy of the Algerian people.
Actualmente, el lugar de nacimiento y de estudios de San Agustín.
Today, the birthplace and place of study of St. Augustine are in Algeria. He also established his episcopal seat there. So for Algerians, even though the vast majority of them are Muslim, St. Augustine is considered an Algerian. As a result, the connection with him, at least on a cultural or symbolic level, is very deep. In fact, there was a lot of joy. They were very pleased when the Pope, in his first greeting on May the 8th, introduced himself as a son of St. Augustine.
El 8 de mayo se presentó como hijo de San Agustín.
In Algeria, the Holy Father traveled to Annaba to visit the archaeological site of Hippo, where St. Augustine was bishop for more than 30 years, until his death in 430.
Es el papa de todos, no solamente de los agustinos.
He is the Pope of everyone, and not just of the Augustinians. But for us, it is certainly also very important, and it's a reason for pride and satisfaction to know that the Holy Father, the current Pope, shares with us that spirituality of St. Augustine. That way of seeing the world, and also of understanding the Church through the spirituality, theology, and pastoral vision of St. Augustine.
De la espiritualidad y de la teología y de la pastoral de San Agustín.
We'll be back to explore how St. Augustine's wisdom inspires Pope Leo XIV.
Sono un figlio di Sant'Agostino, Agostiniano.
Since the day of his election, Pope Leo has repeatedly spoken about and pointed to St. Augustine, his spiritual father, as a model of faith for all. He even opened his ministry during his inauguration Mass in St. Peter's Square by quoting one of St. Augustine's famous timeless insights.
Scriveva:
St. Augustine wrote, "Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you."
riposa in te.
These words, taken from his famous Confessions, capture well St. Augustine's life, from his restless search for truth that led him from worldly desires to philosophical studies, to his eventual life-changing conversion to Christianity. Centuries later, this same search for truth and meaning remains, a message Pope Leo shared with millions of young people during last summer's Jubilee of Youth prayer vigil.
Hace siglos, San Agustín captó el profundo deseo de nuestro
Centuries ago, St. Augustine understood the deepest desire of our hearts, the desire of every human heart, even without the technological developments of today. He too had a restless youth, but he did not settle for less. He did not silence the cry
no
of
se
his heart.
conformó, no silenció el clamor de su corazón.
Once more, he repeated the saint's profound wisdom.
St. Augustine wrote, "You stir us to take pleasure in praising you, because you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. Lord, I would seek you, and calling upon you is an act of believing in you.
The Pope's Augustinian formation and the spirituality of the order are more than evident in his teachings and addresses. Robert Francis Prevost, who was Prior General of the Order of St. Augustine from 2001 to 2013, has forged his vocation and career in the footsteps of this Father of the Church.
Stiamo ascoltando diversi discorsi del Papa e spesso noi troviamo...
We are listening to various addresses of the Pope, and we often find quotations from Augustine, but it is not simply a matter of inserting Augustine's words into his speeches. The Pope also wants to help us understand, we could say, a vision of the Church and a testimony of faith that comes through Augustine's teaching.
Di fede che passa attraverso l'insegnamento di Agostino.
Among the works most frequently referenced is St. Augustine's famous The City of God, which Pope Benedict XVI described as crucial to the development of Western political thought. Augustine wrote it in response to claims that the fall of Rome was a consequence of the rise of Christianity and the abolition of pagan worship. He argued instead that Christianity saved the city from complete destruction, and that Rome's fall was the result of moral decay.
Although the context in which we live today is different from that of the 5th century, some similarities remain highly relevant.
Augustine interprets events and history itself according to the model of two coexisting cities, the city of God and the city of man.
First, there's the city of God, which is eternal and characterized by God's unconditional love, amor Dei, as well as love for one's neighbor, especially the poor. Then there is the earthly city, which is a temporary dwelling place where human beings live until death. Indeed, the earthly city is centered on pride and self-love, amor sui, and the thirst for worldly power and glory that leads to destruction. Augustine emphasizes that Christians are called by God to dwell in the earthly city with their hearts and minds turned towards the heavenly city, their true homeland. At the same time, Christians living in the earthly city are not strangers to the political world, and guided by the scriptures, seek to apply Christian ethics to civil government.
Pope Leo has emphasized that the City of God does not propose a political program, but offers valuable reflections on fundamental issues concerning social and political life, such as the search for a more just and peaceful coexistence among peoples. Augustine also warns of the serious dangers that can threaten political life, themes that Pope Leo has likewise highlighted in his addresses, including during the Jubilee of Justice.
Lo Stato in cui non si ha la giustizia non è uno Stato.
A state without justice is not a state. May these demanding words of St. Augustine inspire each of us to express the exercise of justice as a service of the people, to the best of our ability, always with our gaze turned toward God, so as to fully respect justice, law, and the dignity of every person.
Il diritto e la dignità delle persone.
The search for truth, the practice of charity, and the pursuit of unity and peace. These three essential dimensions found in the writings of St. Augustine have shaped Pope Leo's ministry and continue to inspire his own teachings and even his episcopal motto.
L'unità è sempre stata una mia...
Unity has always been a constant concern of mine, as witnessed by the motto I chose for my episcopal ministry, in illo uno unum, an expression of St. Augustine of Hippo that reminds us how we too, although we are many, in the one that is Christ, we are one.
Cioè Cristo, siamo uno.
Almost 16 centuries after his death, countless men and women continue to walk in St. Augustine's footsteps, inspired by his wisdom, spirituality, and enduring quest for truth. Today, the Augustinian heritage and order have taken on new visibility with the election of Pope Leo XIV, who once led the Order of St. Augustine as Prior General. In September of 2025, the newly elected Pope visited the Augustinianum in Rome to meet with his successor as leader of the Augustinian family, the Order's new Prior General, Father Joseph L. Farrell. EWTN News Vatican editor Hannah Brockhaus met with Father Farrell to discuss his journey in the Augustinian Order, its mission in the Church today, and how he received the news of his own election as Prior General.
In September of 2013, I came to the General Chapter with our Prior Provincial from the province of St. Thomas of Villanova in the States to elect the next leadership. And the plan, the Joe Farrell plan, was then to go back to the United States. But instead, was elected to the position, as you mentioned, as Vicar General. So I've had that honor to serve for the past 12 years. And now since this most recent General Chapter of September, now is the Prior General. It's been a wonderful experience. We kind of hit the ground running with visitations and other province chapters. But one of the benefits is that I don't do it alone. I have a good team to work with, and we support each other.
Explain more, if you can, about what the job encompasses. Maybe someone doesn't know. What does it look like to be the leader of a worldwide religious order? What does that look like day to day, let's say?
One of the main parts of being Prior General is to work towards assisting our brothers and our sisters throughout the world in coming to an understanding of what it means to be one, right? Community is something that's vital for us as Augustinians. And it takes work to build community, to maintain community, and to work towards that unification of us. We all have so much in common, and we all bring our own diversities, our differences together. So one of the main kind of objectives of having a Prior General is to serve the order, to help us maintain that unity among ourselves.
I'm curious if you have noticed a way that your understanding of the charism, maybe of the Augustinians and the mission of the Augustinians, if that's changed from when you first joined, thinking back, then till now, how that has evolved over time.
Yeah, my understanding when I first joined the Augustinians, I knew them as teachers. Really, I knew them working in high school and at the university. And that's what really attracted me to the Augustinians, that I saw them working together in the field of education. After entering is when I learned that the Augustinians do so much more, right? Along with teaching, we're in pastoral ministry, we're in counseling, advocacy work, missionary work. And so my eyes were open to realize that the Augustinians were not dedicated to one particular ministry. And through our formation, I learned that even from the beginning, when we were established as the Order of St. Augustine in the year 1244, we were established to respond to the needs of the world and the Church at any particular moment in history. So that's what we do. We respond. We have to pay attention to the signs of the times. We listen to what's going on in the world, and that's how we continue to serve.
Since Pope Leo XIV's election as Pope, I was wondering if the order has seen an increase in interest, maybe in people interested in vocations. Has there been any kind of Leo effect following his election?
When Pope Leo came to the loggia and announced to the world that he's a son of Augustine, an Augustinian, certainly our chest pushed out a little bit. We were very proud of that, and still are. Our sisters are proud of it. Our friars are proud of that. And that small phrase brought, in a sense, a certain spotlight on the Augustinians that had not been there before. We were the worker bees, keeping our heads down, doing our business. But now there's a spotlight that we're still getting used to. It's uncharted territory for us. And so our vocation directors are working a lot harder than they had in the past. They're working together with each other. And we are seeing an increase in candidates, which means there's an increase in that accompaniment that needs to take place as discernment. No matter what the vocation is in life, people have to go through a discernment period. And so that's what we're working with now. It's only been a year. We hope it continues for a long time. But we're in that period now of discerning with each other how to walk with our sisters and our brothers who are expressing this interest.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Hannah. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless. Thank you.
After a short break, we'll uncover St. Augustine's letter recommended by Pope Leo as spiritual reading for the faithful. While on the papal plane during his 11-day apostolic journey to Africa, Pope Leo was asked about his favorite spiritual readings. Responding to the journalists, the Holy Father pointed to a 4th century letter, Augustine's letter to Proba. It's a letter that the Holy Father has quoted publicly only one time before, while speaking to the Roman Curia about the gift and rarity of genuine friendship and its need to have true communion.
I would like to recall what St. Augustine wrote in his letter to Proba. In all human affairs, nothing is truly cherished without a friend. Yet, he asked, with a note of bitterness, but how seldom in this life is such a person found whose spirit and conduct may be trusted with full confidence.
So who was Proba, and what did St. Augustine write to her about? Proba was a wealthy Roman widow who fled Italy and migrated to North Africa as a refugee with her daughter-in-law Juliana and grandniece Demetrias after the sack of Rome in 410. The letter is a response to Proba, who then asked the bishop about the meaning of St. Paul's words, "We do not know how to pray as we ought," in his letter to the Romans.
Proba decided to remain a widow, and she became also a leading figure in the Christianization of the Roman aristocracy. Proba wrote to Augustine to ask the nature of Christian prayer and how she can live her life as a widow through prayer and the Christian practice.
According to Father Colawole Chabi, a professor at Rome's Pontifical Patristic Institute, Augustinianum, St. Augustine's letter to the noblewoman Proba is one of the most important discourses on Christian prayer in the history of the Church. In the letter, St. Augustine describes prayer as an exercise of desire that increases the soul's capacity to receive God's living grace.
The first thing he did was to speak about the disposition of the person who prays. And then he talked about the object of prayer. Why we pray is because we seek la beata vita, which is the happy life. The happiness does not mean to do what you want, but to do what is right and to possess God. Possessing God is being happy.
According to Father Chabi, this 5th century correspondence between the bishop and the widow remains relevant for Christians today. While Pope Leo has highlighted many of St. Augustine's teachings in his homilies and public addresses, he stands within a long tradition of the Church, which has looked to Augustine's wisdom for centuries.
Generally, Augustine's works are cited, in various church documents. If you take the Catechism, even the documents of the Second Vatican Council, for example, Augustine comes first among the fathers of the church who are cited. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, in the section on prayer, Augustine's letter to Proba was also used.
Recognized as one of the early church fathers who laid the foundations of Christian theology, the renowned Bishop of Hippo wrote several letters to men and women on matters of doctrine and spirituality.
Augustine wrote letters to women that when you read them, you find that he treated them just as equal to any man. So he has a lot of respect. we only need to think of Monica, the value that Augustine gave to the mother.
Having partly attributed his own conversion to Christianity, to the prayers and holy example of his mother, Saint Monica, the saintly bishop, also known as the Doctor of Grace, was confident in the influential role of women in proclaiming the faith in the one true God. In his letter to Proba, the Bishop of Hippo commended the noblewoman for being a pious and devoted handmaid of God, and encouraged her to continue to live her Christian vocation by serving those around her.
Augustine concluded that letter by giving a kind of exhortation to Proba on how to keep the household as a domestic church. So encouraging her as a widow to persevere in prayer, and also to help the members of her family, and that is a very positive. And I think this letter is timely, even after almost 1700 years. It is still very, very important.